He thought he'd found his soulmate on the other side of the world, but after 8 flights, thousands of dollars, and countless promises, he discovered the woman he loved was engaged to 6 other men at the same time. Mark Davies was a 42-year-old accountant living in the suburbs of London, a man whose life followed a quiet, predictable rhythm. His days were filled with spreadsheets, tax reports, and lonely dinners in front of the television. Friends described him as kind but cautious, someone who had spent too many years avoiding disappointment. After a difficult breakup 5 years earlier, he had stopped dating altogether. But loneliness has a way of creeping in, especially during the long English winters. One evening, after scrolling endlessly through social media, he signed up for an international dating site. He told himself it was just curiosity, but deep down, he was hoping for something more, a connection that would make him feel alive again. Among dozens of profiles, one immediately caught his attention. Her name was Neri, a 29-year-old woman from Thailand. Her profile picture showed a gentle smile, dark hair falling across her shoulders, and eyes that seemed to hold both mystery and warmth. Her messages were thoughtful, polite, and filled with affection. She spoke about her dreams, her family, and her belief in destiny. Mark felt drawn to her sincerity. Their conversations became routine, morning messages, late-night chats, video calls filled with laughter and stories about their different worlds. Weeks turned into months, and soon, Neri was more than just a name on a screen. Mark began imagining a life with her, dinners in Bangkok, walks on the beach, maybe even marriage. His friends teased him, warning that love online was risky, but he ignored them. For the first time in years, he felt wanted, needed, and hopeful. When Neri invited him to visit Thailand, saying she wanted to show him her world, he didn't hesitate. He booked the flight, believing he was flying toward love rather than into danger. When Mark's plane touched down in Bangkok, the humid air wrapped around him like a heavy blanket. His heart raced as he made his way through the crowded terminal, clutching a bouquet of lilies he had brought from London. Then he saw her, Neri, standing by the arrival's gate, waving eagerly. She looked even more beautiful in person, her smile wide and genuine. The moment felt unreal, as if everything he had dreamed of for months had finally come to life. She greeted him with warmth, slipping her arm through his, and told him she had planned a week he would never forget. Their days together unfolded like scenes from a postcard. They visited golden temples where monks chanted softly, wandered through colorful night markets, and shared spicy street food under strings of glowing lanterns. On the beaches of Phuket, they walked barefoot along the shore, watching the sunset melt into the water. Neri spoke about her dreams of opening a small cafe and how she wanted to share her life with someone kind and loyal. Each word she said made Mark fall deeper. She introduced him to her family, who welcomed him with polite smiles and homemade food. Her mother called him the gentleman from England, and her younger brother joked about Mark's accent. Everything felt sincere, almost too perfect. Before leaving, Neri held his hand and whispered that she believed they were meant to be. On his flight home, Mark couldn't stop replaying every moment. He felt certain that he had found the woman he would spend the rest of his life with. Back in London, his world suddenly felt brighter. He started counting the days until he could return to Thailand, unaware that behind Neri's beautiful smile, another story was quietly unfolding. A few weeks after Mark returned to London, Neri's messages began to change. They were still sweet, but a new tone appeared, one of worry and distress. She told him her mother had fallen ill and needed surgery, and the hospital bills were overwhelming. Mark didn't hesitate. He transferred the money immediately, feeling proud that he could help. She thanked him endlessly, calling him her guardian angel, and promised to repay him once her family was stable. But not long after, another message came, this time about her rent. Then her car broke down. Then a business opportunity appeared that, she said, could secure their future together. Each story sounded urgent and believable. Mark never questioned it. He was in love, and love made every decision feel right. Each time she asked, he sent more, convincing himself it was temporary and that soon they'd be together for good. He even started skipping small luxuries at home. No new clothes, no expensive dinners, so he could save for their shared dream. Months turned into years. Mark had flown to Thailand 8 times, each trip shorter and more confusing than the last. Neri always seemed busy, distracted, or preoccupied with family matters. She canceled dinners, postponed plans, and sometimes didn't answer his calls for days. But whenever they did meet, she showered him with affection and reassurances, telling him their future was just around the corner. Friends noticed the changes in him. He was quieter, more anxious, and his savings had nearly disappeared. Yet, when they tried to warn him, he defended her fiercely. He believed she was simply struggling and that love required patience. What he didn't know was that behind her tender messages and soft apologies, Neri's carefully built illusion was starting to crack. During his 7th trip to Thailand, Mark decided to stay in a small guest house just a few streets away from Neri's apartment. It was quieter than the hotels he usually booked and gave him a chance to feel closer to her everyday life. The owner, a kind elderly woman, greeted him warmly, and the locals quickly noticed the polite foreign man who always carried flowers in his hands. At first, everything seemed normal, though Mark couldn't ignore how distant Neri had become. She took longer to reply to his messages and often canceled their plans at the last minute, saying she was too tired or busy with her business. One afternoon, while buying snacks at the grocery shop across from her building, the woman behind the counter asked casually if he was the new one. Mark froze for a moment, unsure what she meant. Before he could ask, she smiled awkwardly and changed the subject. The words lingered in his mind for the rest of the day. That evening, Neri canceled dinner again, claiming her mother was unwell. Restless and suspicious, Mark decided to walk past her building. From a distance, he saw a man leaving the entrance carrying flowers and a suitcase. The stranger looked foreign, European, perhaps, and paused to hail a taxi before disappearing down the street. Mark's heart sank. He wanted to believe it was coincidence, but the image gnawed at him. When he confronted Neri later, she brushed it off, saying the man was just a business friend visiting from abroad. Her tone was calm, almost practiced. Mark tried to smile and accept it, but deep down, something inside him shifted. For the first time, doubt began to creep into the space where love had lived so blindly. Back in London, the uneasy feeling refused to leave Mark. The image of the stranger outside Neri's apartment haunted him, replaying in his mind like a scene he couldn't erase. He tried to ignore it, telling himself love required trust, but each new message from her felt colder, shorter, more distant. One evening, after she claimed her phone was broken for 3 days, Mark sat at his computer and searched her name online. What he found shattered everything he believed. On an online forum for foreign travelers in Thailand, he discovered a thread titled, "Beware of Romance Scams in Bangkok." The first post described a woman who sounded eerily familiar. Same age, same city, same photo. Her name was Neri. As he scrolled through the comments, his stomach twisted. Dozens of men had shared their experiences. Each story followed the same pattern. They met her online, fell in love, sent money, and were promised marriage. Then she disappeared. Some had even met her in person, describing her kindness and charm in almost the same words Mark had once used. The realization hit him hard. He wasn't the only one. He spent the next few hours piecing together dates, comparing details, and every new discovery confirmed the truth. The woman he had flown across the world to love had played the same role many times before. Still, part of him needed proof, something beyond online stories. He wanted to hear it from someone who knew her world. Mark began reaching out to others on the forum, asking questions and sharing his own experience. One man replied, saying he had hired a local investigator after being scammed by the same woman. His advice was simple: if you want the truth, go back. But be ready, what you find will break you. Mark returned to Thailand for the 8th time, but this visit was different. The excitement that once filled his heart had been replaced by a quiet determination. He wasn't there for love anymore. He was there for answers. Through the online forum, he found a retired police officer named Somchai, now working as a private investigator specializing in fraud and romance scams. Somchai listened patiently as Mark shared everything, from the first message to the last suspicious visit. Without judgment, he agreed to help and began his investigation immediately. Over the next week, Somchai followed Neri's movements carefully. He photographed her meeting different men, sometimes at cafes, other times at hotels. Each man seemed foreign, well-dressed, and clearly smitten. Somchai traced her financial activity and found multiple bank accounts under different names, all receiving international transfers. What shocked Mark most was how organized it all seemed. This wasn't just casual deceit, it was a full operation. When Somchai finally laid out the evidence, Mark could barely speak. Neri was engaged to 6 men from 6 different countries. One was a German engineer, another a Canadian teacher, 2 were Australians, 1 from Norway, and then Mark himself. Each of them believed they were her only fiancé, each sending her money regularly, and each planning to marry her. Somchai explained that Neri was part of a small but well-connected group of women who targeted lonely foreigners online. They used the illusion of love to build trust, extract money, and move on before suspicion grew. For years, they had operated unnoticed, changing names, photos, and stories. Mark listened in silence, his chest tight with disbelief. Everything he had built his hopes on, the love, the future, the promises, was nothing more than a carefully crafted illusion. Somchai's investigation went deeper than Mark expected. He uncovered records, phone logs, and hidden social media profiles that painted a disturbing picture of Neri's secret life. She was not working alone. 2 women, one posing as a travel agent and another as a jewelry seller, helped manage her schedule, online profiles, and finances. Together, they operated like a small business built entirely on deception. Each woman specialized in something different. One wrote messages to potential victims, another coordinated fake emergencies, while Neri handled the in-person meetings. Their victims believed they were helping a struggling woman, but in reality, they were funding a criminal network. Somchai showed Mark photos of Neri meeting the other women at a cafe, laughing as they counted envelopes filled with cash. There were bank receipts from multiple countries, fake identity cards, and even a hidden ledger listing the men and the amounts each had sent. The total exceeded what Mark could comprehend. His name was written among others, labeled England. Seeing it broke something inside him. Somchai also discovered a pattern in Neri's movements. She rotated her fiancés carefully, meeting each one for short trips, spacing them out to avoid overlap. When one began asking too many questions, she would claim a family emergency and vanish for weeks. Her emotional manipulation was meticulous, almost professional. The deeper the truth went, the colder Mark felt. Every tender moment he remembered now seemed rehearsed. Every tear she had shed looked staged. Somchai warned him that this kind of fraud rarely ended with arrests. Victims often gave up or went home in shame. But Mark wasn't ready to disappear quietly. He wanted accountability. He wanted her lies exposed, even if it meant reliving the worst pain of his life. The truth, he decided, was worth any cost. Armed with Somchai's evidence, Mark went to the Thai police. At first, the officers seemed skeptical. Cases like this were common, and most ended with victims too embarrassed to continue. But when Somchai presented the documents, photos, and bank records, the tone changed. The operation was bigger than anyone had realized, and Neri's network had scammed foreigners across several provinces. Within days, an official investigation began. Officers began monitoring her bank accounts, tracing where the money went. They discovered transactions linked to other suspected scammers, forming a web that stretched across Thailand and into neighboring countries. Mark stayed in Bangkok while the investigation unfolded. He felt a strange mix of anger and heartbreak watching the process. He had once imagined proposing to Neri. Now he was helping build a case to put her behind bars. Somchai kept him informed as the police prepared for a raid. They waited until Neri was scheduled to meet another foreign man at a hotel. When she arrived, the police moved in swiftly. She tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. Inside her apartment, investigators found a treasure trove of evidence: fake passports, prepaid SIM cards, foreign currency, and notebooks listing dates, bank codes, and victim names. Mark's name appeared again, circled in red ink. Along with her 2 accomplices, Neri was arrested on charges of fraud, identity falsification, and conspiracy. News of the arrest spread quickly through online forums and local media. Several victims came forward, each with a story that mirrored Mark's. Though justice was finally catching up to her, Mark felt no victory. Watching her taken away in handcuffs, he didn't feel triumphant, only hollow. The woman he had once loved was now exposed to the world, her empire of lies collapsing piece by piece. The courtroom in Bangkok was crowded the day Neri's trial began. Journalists filled the benches, and the story had already made headlines under titles like Asterisk, the queen of romance scams. Mark sat quietly in the back, trying to steady his nerves. He had spent years believing in her, and now he was about to watch her face the consequences of everything she had done. When she entered the room, dressed in a pale prison uniform, she looked smaller than he remembered. Her confident smile was gone, replaced by a blank stare that avoided his eyes. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence. Somkai's photos, the bank transfers, the fake passports, and testimonies from other victims built an airtight case. One by one, men from different countries stood to describe their experiences, how she had charmed them, how much they had lost, and how they had trusted her completely. The judge listened in silence, occasionally glancing toward Neri, who remained expressionless. Her defense tried to portray her as desperate rather than deceitful, claiming she was manipulated by others higher in the network. But the evidence told a different story. She had been the face of the operation, the one who met the men, the one who kept their money flowing. When the verdict was read, the courtroom fell silent. Neri was sentenced to 7 years in prison for fraud and identity falsification. As the guards led her away, she glanced once toward Mark, her face unreadable. For a moment, he wondered if she felt remorse, or if she was already planning her next deception. Mark walked out of the courthouse feeling both vindicated and broken. The woman he once called his future was now just another name in a criminal file, her promises nothing more than carefully crafted lies. When Mark returned to London, everything felt different. The city was the same, the gray skies, the morning rush, the hum of traffic, but he wasn't. The experience in Thailand had left a mark that went deeper than he expected. He spent the first few weeks avoiding questions from friends, telling them only that things didn't work out. The truth was harder to explain. He wasn't just recovering from heartbreak. He was recovering from betrayal. Nights felt long, and sleep came rarely. Every time his phone buzzed, he half expected a message from Neri, even though he knew she was behind bars. Gradually, he began piecing his life back together. He joined an online support group for victims of romance scams and started sharing his story anonymously. At first, it was painful to relive the details, but over time, helping others gave him a sense of purpose. His warnings stopped other people from falling into the same trap, and for the first time in a long while, he felt useful again. Mark also began volunteering with a charity that educated people about online fraud. Standing in front of small audiences, he spoke calmly about how easy it was to confuse attention with love and how loneliness could blur the line between truth and illusion. People often approached him afterward, thanking him for his honesty. One evening, as he walked along the Thames, he thought about everything that had happened: the flights, the lies, the courtroom. What hurt the most wasn't the money or the humiliation, but the realization that he had ignored his own instincts. Love had made him blind. Yet, despite everything, he didn't regret loving. He only regretted not seeing clearly. From that day on, Mark promised himself to trust again, but never without caution and never without truth.